They say ClemFM needs no introduction, but if that's the case, how would you know when to start listening? Today's episode is titled 50 Things You May Not Know About Former and No Longer Tough Guy, Chuck Norris. Chuck Norris doesn't sleep. Most nights he usually just sniffs glue until he blacks out, but his slumber is always nightmare-filled, and rarely restful. These days, Chuck Norris can't even open up a can of tuna, much less a can of whoop-ass. Chuck Norris is so rotund it takes him 24 hours to do a roundhouse kick. Chuck Norris is so weak he refers to his arms as his Nerf guns. Chuck Norris is so damaged, he once saw a banana peel on the ground and was like, "My God, they skinned the poor bastard alive." Chuck Norris is so depraved, he once went into a porno theatre and sat there quietly in the dark, while other men jerked off all around him. Chuck Norris is so old, he remembers when film scripts were written in the 5 acts of Aristotelian unity. Chuck Norris loves animals because he is one. They say Chuck Norris uses a snake to floss with and eats spider webs like their fairy floss. Chuck Norris is a stand-up guy, which is weird because his regressive species of caveman weren't known for their ability to stand upright. Chuck Norris treats ladies respectfully. He always asks them if they'd prefer to be shot in the stomach before dinner or after. On Sundays, Chuck Norris takes all of his kids to church, except for his illegitimate ones. They're already beyond saving. Chuck Norris is so Botoxed up that in an emergency situation involving water, his massive face can be used for sustained buoyancy. Chuck Norris remembers a simpler time, when people were kinder to each other, and language hadn't been invented yet. Chuck Norris is a practicing yogi, but only because he has a seriously unquenchable thirst for picnic baskets. Chuck Norris is so reprehensible. I don't think he even considers hunting a man and killing him as sport. To him, it's more of a hobby or pastime. Chuck Norris is so uncoordinated, they had to hire a stunt coordinator for Walker Texas Ranger to teach him how to walk. Chuck Norris is such a phony, he doesn't even use his real name on screen when appearing as characters in films. Chuck Norris is such a chameleon that, if you have a fly problem, he'll sort it out with his adhesive, telescopic tongue. Chuck Norris believes dinosaur fossils were put here to test us, which means that the old bastard was also put here to test us. Chuck Norris had to add an extra notch to his black belt after eating a 2-pound raw steak. Chuck Norris is such a crazy old kook, he's always pointing at the Hollywood sign and saying, "There's gold in them there hills!" Chuck Norris has such pungent body odour that it tricks his enemies into thinking that there is a gorilla downwind. Chuck Norris is so bananas, he believes religion should be taught in Sunday schools. Chuck Norris is so tough, you'd have to stew his body for a really long time if you wanted to eat him. Chuck Norris likes playing golf, but if he doesn't get a hole-in-one, he gets so mad. It's like he doesn't understand that a hole-in-one is very rare. Chuck Norris is such a film buff, he's watched all of his own films dozens of times. Chuck Norris is such an insomniac, he should be called Chuck No Rest. Chuck Norris is so regal, he won Best in Show when he entered a dog contest as a Cavalier King Charles. Chuck Norris has so many fillings in his teeth, he really wishes he'd taken better care of them in his youth, centuries ago. Chuck Norris is a one-man army, only in that he shits enough in 3 days to fill up an entire regiment's freshly dug latrine pit. Chuck Norris is so ripped. Well, most of his ligaments are. Chuck Norris is reluctant to discuss politics and religion, until you put a camera in his face. Chuck Norris is so talented, he can put a tiny snake in his mouth, tie it into a knot with his tongue, and only get bitten 7 to 8 times max. Chuck Norris's brain is so fried, he'd probably eat 24 pieces of it straight out of a cardboard bucket, if he could. Chuck Norris is so sweaty, all of his denim is the light stonewash kind, but looks like darker denim, because it's always soaking wet. Chuck Norris is such a skinflint, you can light a match off any part of him. Chuck Norris is such an animal, he considers punches kicks. Chuck Norris is so absent-minded, some mornings he only shaves half of his back. Chuck Norris is so family-oriented, when he kills a guy by kicking him in the head, he finds the man's family and kicks them in the head too. Chuck Norris was offered a role in the movie Point Break as the surfboard. Chuck Norris is so unhealthy, he got bit by a rattlesnake and after 3 torturous days, the snake died of diabetes. Chuck Norris starred in the movie Top Dog, alongside a dog that appears to have been played by his identical twin brother. Chuck Norris is a real neat freak. He's always shooting people and saying, "Neat!" right after he's murdered them. Chuck Norris is so tragic. He once went to a party and sat all by himself near the empty pool, while wearing his dad's tuxedo that was a size too big for him. Chuck Norris is so clueless when it comes to martial arts. When someone said he needed nunchucks, he started his own convent. Chuck Norris is such a bad fisherman that when he went out on a boat and I gave him a fishing pole, he asked, "What's this for?" Chuck Norris is such a booze hound. On set they all called him Stumbler Texas Ranger. Chuck Norris is so obtuse. He never kicks anyone above the waist. Chuck Norris is so cheap. He once roundhouse kicked a waiter who asked him for a tip. Chuck Norris gets so many fan letters, but he never opens a single one, because the man can't read. Someone's been moving furniture around and turning my electric blanket on while I'm asleep, so I awake even more sweaty than usual. My toilet paper and eggs went missing, and then reappeared strewn and splattered all over the outside of my house. Am I being haunted by the ghost of my teenage self?